Good morning, everyone. All right, so I'm ready to start chapter 13 of the City of Ember. Okay, so if you remember in chapter 12, Lena and Dune had just gone and taken the information to the guards that the mayor was stealing. Remember, they had found that out? So they had taken that information to the guards. And so now we're on chapter 13 and it's called Deciphering the Message. So remember at the message from the very beginning, the instructions, and Lena had found the instructions, but Poppy had eaten them and ripped them up, and so they were all in pieces. So this is deciphering, which is like decoding. So deciphering the message. So here we go, chapter 13. Dune headed for home, and Lena went in the opposite direction across Harkin Square. The little group of believers had gone, but the protesters with their signs continued to pace back and forth. A few of them were still shaking their fists in the air and yelling, but most of them tramped silently, looking tired and discouraged. Lena felt a bit that way, too. Once Dune said he'd seen a door, she was sure that the door he'd found and the door in the instructions were the same. She had had such hopes for that door in the pipeworks, but hoping so hard had made her jump to conclusions. She'd gone a little too fast. She always went too fast. Sometimes it was a good thing, and sometimes not. Now Dune thought the instructions were nothing important after all. She didn't want him to be right. She didn't believe that he was. Even now, but her thoughts felt like a mess of tangled yarn. She needed someone wise and sensible to help her sort things out. She headed for Gloam Street. Do you remember where Gloam Street is? I know we haven't seen our map in a long time, but that's way down near the bottom of the map, way over by the greenhouses. Can you guess who she's going to see? You're right, I bet you guessed it. Though it was nearly 6 o'clock, she found Clary still in her workroom at the far end of greenhouse number 1. It was a small, crowded room. Pots and trowels cluttered a high table at one end. Above the table were shelves full of bottles and seeds and boxes and string, wire, and various kinds of powders. Clary's desk was a rickety table littered with scraps of paper, all of them covered with notes in her neat, rounded handwriting. 2 rickety chairs went with the rickety table, one on each side. Lena sat down facing Clary. "I have to tell you something important," she said, "and they're all secret." "All right," said Clary. "I can keep secrets." She was wearing a patched shirt that had faded from blue to gray. Her short brown hair was tucked behind her ears, and a bit of leaf clung to it on the right-hand side. She folded her arms in front of her on the desk. She looked square and solid. "The first thing is," Lena began, "that I found the instructions, but Poppy had chewed them up." "The instructions?" said Clary. "I'm not familiar with the instructions." Lena explained. She went on to explain everything, how she'd shown the instructions to Dune, what they'd figured out, how he'd searched the pipeworks and found the door, and what he'd seen when he'd opened the door. Clary made an unhappy sound and shook her head. "This is very bad," she said, "and sad too. I remember when the mayor was first starting out," she said. Has always been foolish, but not always wicked. I'm sorry to know that the worst side of him has won out." Clary's dark brown eyes seemed to grow deeper and sadder. There was so much darkness in Ember. "Lena, it's just not on the outside. It's inside us, too. Everyone has some darkness inside. It's like a hungry creature. It wants and wants and wants with a terrible power. And the more you give it, the bigger and hungrier it gets." Does that remind you of anything? That wanting something so much? It's making me think about Lena when she was in Luber's store looking at those colored pencils, that feeling she had when she just wanted them so bad. She wanted and wanted, and that feeling was like a hunger in her. Remember she talked about that? That's what's making me think of right now. Clary let out a long breath, and a few of the scraps of paper on her desk fluttered. She ran her fingers through her hair and felt a bit of leaf and plucked it out, and then she said, "About these instructions." "Oh, yes," said Lena. "They might be important, or they might not be. I just don't know." "I'd like to see them if you'd let me." "Of course you can see them, but you'd have to come home with me." "I'll come now if that's okay," said Clary. "There's plenty of time before lights out." Lena led Clary up the stairs and into her new bedroom at Mrs. Murdo's. "Nice room," Clary said, looking around with interest. "And I see you have a sprout." "A what?" said Lena. "Your beans," said Clary, pointing at the little pot of dirt on the windowsill. Lena bent down to see what Clary was talking about. Sure enough, the dirt was heaving up a little. She touched the pushed-up part, brushed away the dirt, and discovered a pale green loop. It looked like a neck, as if a creature in the bean were trying to escape, but hadn't yet managed to pull its head out. Of course, she already knew that plants grew from seeds, but to have put that flat white bean in the dirt, to have almost forgotten about it, and to now see it was forcing its way up into the air. "It's doing it," she said. "It's coming to life." Clary nodded, smiling. "Still amazes me every time I see it," she said. Lena brought out the instructions, and Clary sat down at the table to study them. She puzzled over the patchwork of scraps for a long time, tracing the lines with her finger, murmuring the parts of the words. "Well, what you figured out seems so far about right to me," she said. "I think orc must be pipeworks, and enk must be riverbank. So this bit must be down riverbank. Then there's a big space here, to edge. Edge of what, I wonder? And does it mean down riverbank, as in walk alongside the river?" "Yes, I think so," Lena said. "Or does it mean go down over the edge of the riverbank itself, down the bank toward the water? Maybe edge means edge of the water." "It couldn't mean that. The bank goes straight down like a wall. You couldn't go down to the edge of the water. You'd fall in." Lena pictured the dark, swift water and shivered. "This word," said Clary, putting a finger on the paper. "Maybe it isn't edge. Maybe it's something else. It could be hedge or pledge. Those don't make much sense, but it could also be ledge or wedge." Lena saw that Clary was no better at deciphering the puzzle than she was. She sighed and sat down on the end of her bed. "It's hopeless," she said. Clary straightened up quickly. "Don't say that. This torn-up piece of paper is the most hopeful thing I've ever seen. Do you know what this word is?" She pointed at the word at the top of the paper. "Egress. Egres. Someone's name, isn't it? The title would be Instructions for Egreston, or maybe Egressman, or something like that. The person the instructions were for." "I don't think so," said Clary. I wonder what Clary's thinking. So all this time we've been thinking that word egres, egress, was somebody's name, but Clary knows something that we don't know. That word all by itself means something. It does. We're about to find out. This word right here, if you put an S on the end, where the tear in the paper is, you get egress, Egress. Do you know what that means? "No," said Lena. "It means the way out. It means the exit." The title of this document is Instructions for Egress, or Instructions for the Way Out. Oh my goodness, boys and girls, if we were in class right now, I would be telling you to turn and talk to somebody about this. What do you think this means? The instructions for the way out. But I thought Lena learned that there was no other place, that Ember was the only light in a dark world. Remember that? So instructions for the way out, an exit to where? Oh my gosh. I also, if we were in class right now, you know what I would be doing to you? I would go like this. And you'd all be yelling, "No, no," for me to keep reading. So I'm going to keep reading. Here we go. When Clary left, there was still over an hour before lights out. Lena raced across the city to Greengate Square. To Greengate Square. She glanced in the window of the small item shop where Dune's father was reaching for something on a shelf. Then she dashed up the stairs and knocked on the door to Dune's apartment. Right away, she heard the quick steps, and Dune opened the door. "I have something exciting to tell you," Lena said breathlessly. "Come in, then." Lena went across the cluttered room to stand by a lamp. She pulled from her pocket the tiny piece of paper on which she had written, "Egress." "Look at this word," she said. "It's from the title of the instructions, someone's name," said Dune. No, said Lena. It means to be egress, with 2 S's. I showed the instructions to Clary, and she told me it means the way out. The way out? Cried Dune. Yes, the way out, the exit. It's instructions for the way out of Ember. So it is real, said Dune. It is. We have to figure out the rest, or as much of the rest as possible. Can you come now? He darted into his room, emerged with his jacket, and they ran. Now I'm going to take a second and I'm going to turn the camera around because this next part of the book shows parts of the instructions where there's the little pieces missing, and I want you to be able to see that while I'm reading. So I'm going to turn my camera around and I'm going to show you the book while I'm reading, okay? So you can be looking at that part of the book. So give me just a second. I'm going to see if I can do this. All right, how am I doing? All right, here's the book. Ready? Oh, there's Mrs. Reading. Okay, here we go. I'm right over here. All right, said Lena. They were on the floor of the blue-green room at Mrs. Murdo's. Let's take the first line. She moved her finger along it. And you see that first line right there? EXP and all those spaces. RIV and that big space. And there's that IP-ORC that we figured out at the beginning. We know that IP-ORC is pipeworks, she said. EXP could be expand or explore or expose. There's a big space between EXP and the rest, said Dune. There must be more words in there. But who knows what they are? Let's move on. Lena swept her straggly hair impatiently back from her face. Look at number 2. Okay, so look at number 2. A big space, STON, marked with E by R, and a space, and then DGE. Lena put her finger on STON. What could that be? Maybe piston, said Dune. That's part of a machine like the generator. Or maybe it's astonish. Or it could be up to the top. I bet it's just plain stone, said Lena. There's a lot of stone in the pipeworks. Dune had to admit this was probably right. So then he said, it would be a stone marked with E? He frowned at the next bit. That must be River Edge. Stone marked with E by River Edge. Let's go take a look again. Does that look like stone marked with E by River Edge? They looked at each other in delight. E for egress, said Lena. E for exit. They bent over the document again. There's not much left of this next line, said Dune. So here's 3. Big space, ADDE, down. Looks like riverbank. Some spaces. 2, edge, APPR, big space, 8, low. Just this part, which must say down riverbank to edge something. Edge of water would make sense, but right after edge, there's APP. What would that be? Dune sat back on his heels and gazed up at the ceiling, as if the answer might be there. Lena muttered, down riverbank to edge. Edge. She thought of Clary's guesses about the line. Maybe it's ledge, she said. Down riverbank to ledge? There could be a ledge down there, down near the water? Yes, that must be right. There is a stone marked with E, and down the riverbank at that point there is a ledge. I think we're getting it. Here's the next one. Once again, they crouched over the page, their heads close together. Okay, Dune said, line 4. All right, take a look at all that. I'm not going to read it all, but take a look at all of that. This is where it says door, said Lena. Somehow the door is by the ledge. Does that make sense? And there's that small steel pan. What can that mean? What would a pan have to do with anything? But look. Lena tapped the paper urgently. Here it says K-E, and here it says E-Y. It's talking about a key. But what is it a door to? Asked Dune, sitting back. Okay, I'm going to turn the book back around for a second. Oh, here I am again. All right. Okay, that's the last of that part, so I'm going to keep going from there. But what is it a door to? Said Dune, sitting back. Remember, we thought about this before? A door in the bank of the river would lead under the pipeworks. Now remember, there's the city of Ember, and then there was the storerooms, and then there was the pipeworks. So they're way under the ground there. So if there was a door that was under the pipeworks, it would be way underground. So that would be a problem if they were leaving the city, right? Lena pondered this. Maybe it leads to a long tunnel that goes way out beyond Ember and then gradually up and up until it comes out at the door of the other city. What other city? Dune glanced at the drawings tacked to the wall of Lena's room. Oh, he said, you mean that city? Well, it could be. Dune shrugged. I suppose so. Or it could be another city exactly like this one. Can you imagine if they got out of Ember and they actually went to another city and it was exactly like Ember with all the same problems and everything was the same? That would really be another plot twist, wouldn't it? That was a gloomy thought. Both of them felt their spirits sink at the idea. So they turned back to the task of deciphering. Next line, said Lena. But Dune sat back on his heels again. He stared into the air, half smiling. I have an idea, he said. If we do find a way out, we'll need to announce it to everyone. Wouldn't it be splendid to do it during the singing? Stand up there in front of the whole city and say we'd found it? Remember, the singing was their holiday that they had in Ember, where everybody got together and sang songs in the town square where everybody was together. So Dune's thinking, if we find something, wouldn't it be great if right in the middle of this holiday with all of the people gathered and from the whole town, we could make this great announcement? Because remember, Dune really likes the idea of being the hero of the story, and he'd love for that to happen. It would be, said Lena, but that's only 2 days away. Yes, we have to hurry. They were bending again over the glued-down fragments when Dune remembered that he should check the time. It was 9:15. That's only 15 minutes. He barely had time to get home. Come again tomorrow, said Lena, and while you're at work, look for the rock marked with E. That night Dune had trouble sleeping. He couldn't find a comfortable position on his bed. It seemed to be made up of nothing but lumps and wrinkles, and it squeaked and groaned every time he moved. He flailed around so much that the noise woke up his father, who came into his room and asked, What is it, son? Nightmares? Now, I'm imagining if we were in the room right now and I read that line, some of you would have your hands shooting up. Like I'm thinking, definitely Liam, you'd have your hands shooting up, and probably Owen would have his hands shooting up, and a few other ones too, a few other ones of you. When I said something like, they're looking for a rock with the E, and then this author wrote on that felt like his bed was made up of nothing but lumps and wrinkles. Does that remind you of anything? I know some of you it does, I'm sure. If not, that's okay, because it's coming up. You'll see in just a minute. No, said Dune, I just can't sleep. Are you worrying? Frightened of anything? Dune wanted to say, yes, Father, I'm worried because the mayor of our city is taking for himself the things that the people need. And I'm afraid because any day our lights could go out forever. I'm worried and afraid a lot of the time. And I'm also excited because I think there is a way out and we might find it. And all those feelings were whirring around in my head, which makes it hard to sleep. He could have told his father everything. His father would have plunged in with great enthusiasm. He would have helped them decipher the instructions and expose the mayor's thievery. He would even have come down to the pipeworks and helped search for the rock marked with E. But Dune wanted to keep those things to himself for now. Tomorrow the guards would announce that an alert young boy had uncovered the mayor's crime, and his father, hearing the announcements along with the rest of Ember's population, would turn to the person next to him and say, That's my son they're talking about, my son. So he really wants his dad to be so proud of him, so he's not telling his dad anything about what he's found out. So instead, in answer to his father's question, he simply said, No, Father, I'm all right. Well then, see if you can lie still, said his father. Good night, son, he added, and closed the door. Dune smoothed out his covers and pulled them up to his chin. He closed his eyes, but he still couldn't sleep. So he tried a method that had often worked for him before. He would choose a place he knew well, the school for instance, and imagine himself walking through it, picturing it as he went in minute detail. Often his thoughts would wander, but he would always bring them back to the imaginary journey, and something about doing this would often make him sleepy. This night he decided to retrace his explorations of the pipeworks. He held in his mind the task for a long time, picturing with all the clarity that he could muster everything he had seen in the underground realm. The long stairway, the tunnels, the door, the path along the river, the rocks along the path. He felt sleep drawing closer, the heaviness in his limbs, but just as he was about to give in, he saw in his mind's eye, that's his memory, the wrinkled rocks that bordered the river at the west end of the pipeworks. The rocks whose strange ridges and creases had reminded him of writing. Yep, do you remember? That's the thing I'm thinking about. His eyes flew open in the dark, and his heart began to hammer, and he gave up on sleeping and lay in a state of terrible impatience for the rest of the night. And this time I really am stopping there. Here's Mrs. reading. She's going right in the book. Oh my gosh. Do you remember that? Those times when he would just go walking down by the river back and forth? Remember, way at the east end is where the generator was, and at the west end of the river was where the river went into the wall of the river. And right by there were clumps of rocks, and he would often go there and sit when he had finished his jobs. And that he said that there was a lot of wrinkles in the rocks that looked like the water had maybe worn out those lines there. Well, just as he was about to fall asleep, that's what he was thinking of. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm wondering if the author did that on purpose back in those, that a couple pages back when he said it seemed to be made up, his bed seemed to be made up of nothing but lumps and wrinkles. I think that was a little bit of foreshadowing that was happening in our book there. All right, so that's chapter, 13? That was chapter 13, Deciphering the Message. So our next, oh my gosh, guess what our next chapter is called? I just turned the page. You're not going to believe it. It's going to be backwards, but I'm going to show you. Maybe you can decipher it. Can you decipher it? It's called The Way Out. It is. It's called The Way Out. So we'll do that one next time. All right, this is getting exciting, guys. See you later.